Hello, this is Andrea from OurDayDream back again with another awesome chat. This week we have Terraine Brown. He is a podcast host for the Behind the Shade show, where he interviews different people that have a story to share and an inspirational word. I hope you like this chat. We speak about a lot, including his story, but also relationships. I think it is worth your time. So without further ado, here is Terraine.
I say these two things. I was like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Because sometimes you can't be both.
True. I love that. That's so
Right?
good.
And with my parents, it was right of me to be upset. It was right for me to be hurt. It was right for me to be a lot of these things. But the more it consumed me, the more I let it consume me, the less happy I felt. So I just said, Terraine, you have your health. Things are going well for you. Why not just move on? Don't forget, but move on. And that's how I made amends initially.
Hello.
Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am very well. I'm glad to be here with you today.
Awesome. I'm super excited. I always like to start out with what's your story? What brought you to who you are today?
Oh, absolutely. So, that's a beautiful question. So what brought me today is that I used to give Bible readings in church, and I enjoyed that so much. So I wanted to continue to help people down that line, but unfortunately, I stopped doing it and I actually ended up leaving the church, which was a very sad moment in my life. But I was able to find myself again. And years later, I came back doing exactly what I should have been doing all along. And I've rebuilt all those bridges that were kind of falling apart, but weren't necessarily burned to the ground. And here I am enjoying life again.
Yeah. Do you, whenever you say you're back to those roots, what you're saying is you feel like God had put a calling on your life to kind of, spread some sort of message to the world?
I believe so because, like many people, I was in the church at a very young age and I did understand it, like in my 2 years, 3 years, 4 years old. But then I came in contact with a couple of people around the age of 18 and 19. And that's when I felt what I felt. And what I felt was a strong longing. Like I've been called, right? And I was kind of not paying attention to the calling, but then it was right in my face. And basically the person said, hey, have you ever given God an opportunity? And I said, I have, but not a sincere one. And I did that. And then my circumstances changed a couple of years while I was doing that. And then I had to fall back a little bit. But then a few years from that, I made a decision to go back versus someone being put in my path. And that was the difference. And I think that's probably why this has lasted longer, because it was me saying, hey, the prodigal son has returned. Let's
Yeah,
continue
that's
this
awesome.
forward.
So you did, you did have the Behind the Shade show before, or was it a different type of dynamic? Is this your second run then doing the podcast?
This is absolutely my first.
This is your
So my
first.
first, yeah. So the first experience was just face to face in front of the church, in front of the congregation. But the
Got
last
you.
2 years has been me using this platform to get people's story out there.
Right. And I love what it is that you're doing. I seen on the it's kind of like a commercial clip on your YouTube channel where you had spoke about kind of like you grew up without parents. Can you tell us about that? Like what
Yes,
that instilled in you today?
absolutely. So the first 5 years of my life, I wasn't raised by my mother, my father. I was raised by my grandmother, and the impact that had on me wasn't known until I began to see other families with their parents. And Andrew, here am I going, imagine I'm going to the park, right? And I'm playing around with other kids and you don't realize it because kids are kids. But then when it's time to go home, you see everyone's parents look so much younger than the one that you're
Yeah.
there with, right? And then you begin to ask questions because children are so inquisitive, right? They ask, "Mommy, what's wrong? What's this? What's this? Daddy, how can I help with this?" So the impact it had on me is I began to always hang around with people that were much older. I didn't care for people my age. I didn't care for people that looked like they were close to my age. Um, so my friends were older. The women that I would date were older. I'm talking some cases 10, 15 years, right? Um, and then when I finally met them, I didn't have that connection, unfortunately, with my parents that you see on TV or you see with your other family members. And they kind of didn't develop a relationship with me until much, much later on in life. And that took some getting used to.
So your parents did come back into the picture at 5 years old then.
They did, but we definitely didn't have a parental child relationship at that point.
Did you have to live with them, or I'm just curious, sorry.
No, no, this no, you can open book. I'm an open book. So I had to live with them. And one of the reasons actually I left the church, there's a disconnection, was in the church family is big. And I felt that I was going to be as honest as possible in regards to my relationship. So I shared my disconnection with my parents and my childhood events. And at the time, I felt that was the right thing to share, but maybe I shouldn't have shared all of that so early on because I wasn't even baptized yet in that church, right? So I felt that it was being used against me because once I volunteered that information, certain activities I could no longer participate in
Oh, wow.
because of the optics of it, right?
Interesting.
So that put me in a difficult spot when it came to my religious teachings at an adult level.
I hear a lot of stories of kids that went through that, but even that, even if you have like parents that don't really pay attention to you while you're growing up, and you're not really parented, that there's like this sort of, issue with how do I relay this? It's kind of like for me, it was like easy for me to get rid of relationships. Like I would be quick to jump the gun. So but some people say like it's just hard to be like vulnerable in relationships and stuff like that. Do you feel like you suffered with that at all?
I did. I did. Even to this day, it's been years. Like I'm in my 30s at this point, right? So it's been years, and even my connection with my family is strained in a lot of ways. But the biggest impact, and I didn't realize this actually until maybe I was much older, like in my, let's say the last 5, 6 years, was you always want to be that person that you don't want anything to bother you. But I felt that that was actually not the best thing to feel because when I was in a relationship, let's say a romantic one, it became unusual for me to express that. Right? If
Yeah.
I'm in a relationship with you, Andrew, and I say, Andrew, what you're doing today to me bothers me, I would say it in a way that maybe you wouldn't take it seriously. I'll say, hey, Andrea, the way that you spoke to me the other day, I didn't like it. And then I'll carry on. And then you might be
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, is he serious or is he joking? Is he something else? And then you may come back to it because you're an empathetic person. And some people may just say, okay, he's clearly over it, so I'm not going to bring it up again. And then I'll mention it a second time and a third time. So
Yeah.
I found that to be difficult dealing with people I didn't know that I want to get to know in a romantic or even a personal manner.
You said that you had made amends with your parents. Did that help with your healing then too?
It did in the beginning because I go about I say these two things. I was like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Because sometimes you can't be both.
True. I love that. That's so
Right.
good.
And with my parents, it was right of me to be upset. It was right for me to be hurt. It was right for me to be a lot of these things. But the more it consumed me, the more I let it consume me, the less happy I felt. So I just said, Terraine, you have your health. Things are going well for you. why not just move on? Don't forget, but move on. And that's how I made amends initially within myself. And then I went to my parents and said, hey, this is the situation. I didn't like that you guys abandoned me because that's what I felt. Can you tell me why it happened? And one day we had a conversation, and some of the answers I didn't like, but overall the conversation was productive. And I said, okay, I have my closure, which is important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. If I look back on my childhood, there's a lot of trauma, but as an adult, you kind of like you start putting things into perspective a little bit. Like they were doing the best that they could with what they had, with how they were taught, what they were dealing with and what they learned along the way. And I suppose it's easier to, kind of find that understanding in it. It's like, maybe if they're not even sorry, it's like, what did that to them to make them, do that? What produced that made them do that? Um, but I definitely feel like forgiveness is a huge part of freedom.
In every holy book, that is the general theme is forgiveness
Yeah.
because we have to ask for it. And I can share this with you, Andrew. Like when a parent looks you in the face and they said, we had a decision to make, basically, either we be parents and live the lifestyle that we currently have, or we say, hey, let's stop being a parent for a while, make some money, and then come back to it. No child wants to hear that,
Yeah.
that a parent made a decision between money and them. But then you begin to realize and say, hey, this is what they knew. They needed the financial security to be the type of parent that they believe that they could. And I could understand that. It may not be something that I can do, but I can understand that. And it wouldn't be very Christian of me to say that, okay, I'm going to hold this over them forever. Because what I've learned in the church is that to give forgiveness, to ask for
Yeah.
forgiveness, you have to be able to give it too. So
Absolutely. Do you feel like enduring that as a child and I imagine it was probably, you felt alone oftentimes as a child, even if you did have, grandparents. I can imagine that being a feeling. I'm not sure if that's the case. Did you?
I did because I want to run around and my
Yeah,
caretakers are old, right? So
yeah,
I did
yeah,
experience that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I imagine that would, like, do you think the Behind the Shade show would exist today if you hadn't have went through that?
I don't think so. I think I would have been growing up half French. I think I would have been a different place. I probably would have been a different part of my country. I think I would have grown up in different circumstances, and I wouldn't have the connection with people's stories that I have with now. Like when I look at your story and your journey, I feel a connection because I'm thinking in my mind, wow, I went through this. She's gone through this. We're kind of like connected and bonding. Whereas if
Yeah.
I grew up sheltered, maybe I wouldn't have gone out and searched for those who are similar to me in their
Yeah.
pain and their success.
Right. And then also being that your parents were kind of materialistic, you might have been more about building economic structures than wanting to provide people what you needed the most, which is, healing and, love and understanding that you're not alone and things like that, right?
Oh yeah, I probably would have been in a 10-bedroom mansion with my butler and my maid, and I would have missed out on so many connections.
Right. Yeah. I've met some pretty prestigious humans that were just completely miserable, because they missed that dynamic of really helping other people and caring and getting outside of their economic structure. I mean, it could go both ways, but at the end of the day, I really do believe that service and caring for others is what fills us up.
I believe so as well, and our backgrounds will definitely tell us that, and it shapes you. It shapes you to be a better person because you know what life is like without the success,
Yeah.
right? And that's such a test to be able to survive what you've gone through, what I've gone through, or so many people have gone through. That is what keeps my cup full because no one can take away my perseverance from me.
Amen. Yeah, it's so true. I was watching TD Jakes today and he was saying about that too. He's like, you really got to be mindful for those teachers out there that are teaching stuff that they never experienced, because some things you can't learn unless you've actually experienced it. And so I really do believe that wisdom doesn't come from reading a book, it comes from experience.
There's a quote that in my education days where people would, because of their title or maybe their level of wealth, they had the conceit of wisdom, but they didn't have true wisdom. And it's like, would we ever go to a person who's homeless for money advice? Maybe
Right.
not, right? So that's why you have to look at that as well. So what he said was very profound because you want to say, hey, you've gone through war. How was that experience versus someone who just watches it on TV?
Right.
It's totally different.
Right. So true. So tell us about the Behind the Shade show.
So the Behind the Shades show is something that I started about 2.5 years ago, just to give a voice to some people who are unable to share their story. What I realize is that many people have a story, but sometimes they don't know how to articulate it or say it, or maybe they don't even have the resources. So what I decided to do one day is to grab a microphone, stick it in someone's face and say, hey, speak. And then you begin to realize that people will talk and talk and talk, right? And then you have to kind of edit it down and cut it down. But the beautiful
Yeah.
thing about it is that there's 7 billion plus people on this planet, 16 different personality types, depending on who you ask, right? And then you find out that my story is someone's story in Australia, is someone's story in America, is someone's story in Europe. You
So
began to see this connection. And then when you take the religious aspect of it and you say that, hey, we're so connected in so many different ways besides the physical, the spiritual connection, then you're like, wow, we all are literally in this together. So
Yes.
that's why I started Behind the Shades, to push that movement and to push that narrative and say, hey, let's unite because we've been divided for far too long.
Yeah, so true. I think about that oftentimes. It's like I've learned from every person that I've ever communicated with or listened to. Like there's something that you could learn from everybody, and everybody's got something to teach. It's like, are you open to listening? You know?
Close the mouth, open up the ears, and knowledge will flow through.
Yep, yeah, yeah. So what was the moment? What was the moment that you decided to start the Behind the Shade show? Like, what provoked that thought?
I wanted to do more than I was doing. And I'll share this with you. I became complacent in my growth. And by my growth, I mean on a level where I was helping people. I felt that I had reached a ceiling that I didn't think I can reach, and I definitely didn't plan to reach it that quickly. But that was from a professional standpoint, meaning in my job. And then when everyone went through the lockdowns and the quarantines and things of that nature, it gave me the opportunity to think within. So introspection was a big component. And one day I sat and I felt like I was talking to someone, but I was talking to myself, and it's just, Terraine, you need to get up and do this. You've put it off for too long. You've been away for too long. It's time to come home. And I made a decision that says, this is what I'm supposed to do. And Andrea, let me tell you, the passion that I had in my teens, the passion I had in my early adulthood is the exact same passion I have now, just have more resources to do it, and it fuels it, and it makes me so much more happier. I haven't been this happy in and out in a couple of years.
That's awesome. Um, is it kind of like like, how do you find your guests? Is it kind of, I know I've thought about it, like it's something that will bother me, or the one day I was like, I really suck at small talk. So like maybe I could find a guest that's like really awesome at small talk. And so then I'll be on the search for that. And so is that kind of how you like to do it? Or do you feel like um I had another guest that said it seems like the more that you do, the more that comes back to you with it. And so do you feel like you keep like the guests just keep coming to you, or how is that? How are you
I
finding
b-
your guests?
yeah, I believe so. I believe it definitely takes practice. As you're probably aware, I love small talk. I can small talk until I can do tiny talk, but I enjoy it, and I think it's something that it takes experience. When I first started out, I was on my cell phone, and I did it in my backyard, and I had to check the weather before because if it rained, I couldn't do an interview. But you begin to realize that you have to navigate the ship of the person because your guest is key. And there are times where I'd interview a guest and their point of view may not be something that I subscribe to, but I like hearing them talk about it, right? Because they can say something along, let's say, polygamy. I want 5 wives, I want 5 husbands. And I'm like, I can't even get one wife. I don't know how some people can get 5 and afford 5. But you begin and you listen, you're like, okay, I can understand why they think that way. Or if you have someone that's very religious, same thing. Or if you have someone that is very sexually liberated, you have that as well. So one of the things that I began to learn was listen to what your guest is saying, understand their perspective, but you want to make sure you can get someone that can speak their perspective, because sometimes, and you may have experiences that they'll just say something like for shock value, and then you're like, kind of like, oh my god, why do they say that?
Do you feel like the more, like when you started this journey of finding guests for the Behind the Shade show, do you feel like they just keep showing up randomly, the different guests? Like, how are you getting guests on the Behind the Shade show? Do you feel like that's contributed to like God has you aligned in that? Or
I think everything that I do is fueled by that,
yeah,
right? Like if it's I'll give the example, if it's like a car, right? That is my fuel.
yeah,
You understand? And then the guests are just the passengers. They come in and out. Someone might say, "Hey, Terraine's a good host. Do you mind getting an Uber ride from Terraine?" I was like, "Yeah, hop
yeah,
on in." And they bring their family, and then everyone's in the back seat. They have their luggage in the trunk and things like that. And then my passion would be the engine of it, and then my faith is a steering wheel because it guides me where I need to go. So that's how I would get my guests, because that's how it starts. So it's me putting in the hard work, but that hard work is guided, directed, and fueled by what I believe in. And then the guests are people that I meet, or it's people that will refer and things of that nature. So those are the 3 ways that I meet my guests.
so whenever I was watching, the show and stuff, there's so many different inspirational topics, but just to the listeners that are listening, that are going to listen to this, what are some topics that come up to the top of your head that you can remember that are just like stand out the most to you on the
Oh,
Behind the Shade?
anything, yeah, anything that deals with relationships. I remember and I'll share this. I remember interviewing a few guests, and it must have been timing of the interviews because I definitely didn't plan it. And it seemed like there was like a couple of people that they're always speaking about relationships and what they want to do and how they want to find the person. And then through the conversation, when the interview ended, and I'll have like 5-10 minutes where I speak to them afterwards, they're all like, "Yeah, I want something casual," and I'm sitting there thinking, Are are you talking to me? At this point, right? Because a date is an interview in a way, right? So you begin to think and you begin to wonder, and it's like, wow, okay, I guess if you're looking for something like that, I can understand, because then you're gonna open yourself up to dating a number of people.
Right.
So that's something that came up because dating 5-10 years ago is different than it is now. And I think that you have both sides, right? You have both men and women saying that I can do the casual thing versus if you ask my parents, your parents, or your grandparents, the person who was most likely to be casual was probably the man, but you knew who they were. You don't want
Yeah,
anything to do with that man, right?
yeah.
Now it's like, yeah, I can do that. I can do
Society acceptable.
this. It's
Yeah,
different.
yeah. It's really corrupt. And then
Oh,
and then, a lot of the dating scene, especially in your 30s, are single parents because relationships don't last anymore. And so a lot of, the dating scene, you're picking up, now you're picking up being a parent for somebody else's child, and you're trying to move into that dynamic, which puts complications on a whole nother level, and so it's really difficult dating in the society that we live in, for sure.
it's tough. I work with at-risk women. So another area that I work in, I work with women who are at risk, who've been either physically, sexually, or emotionally abused, right? Financially too. And it's tough getting them back into the market because a lot of them are older, let's say 40 plus, 50 plus. And I make the joke to them. I was like, can you guys even understand all this? Like the swipe left, swipe right? Because when you found your husband way back when, you just had to take the 5-cent ferry to the farmer's market and say, hey, right? It's a little bit different. So now it's tough for them because instead of, let's say, a few dates a month to find Mr. or Mrs. Right, now they're going on 4 or 5 dates a week.
Yeah,
That's tough.
yeah. I had a lady that I was taking care of in the nursing home, and I seen the picture in her drawer of this man. I'm like, who is this hottie? And she's like, that was my husband. She's like, I don't know, it was close to her 90s or something. He was no longer alive anymore. And so she was telling me about the story as she met him at a movie theater. She was working. And so at that time, they had the drive, like they would ride the skates to the window and drop off the food, the order at the theater. And so she was doing that. She's like, I met him. He started with trying to win me over. She said a week later we were married, and they were together for like 60 years. I was like, that is incredible. But that's how they did things back then. They went all in. It wasn't like, oh, I think I'll try this out and see how it works out. It was like, I want this and I'm going all in.
Yeah, I would love to meet my wife like that. I'm gonna actually after this, I'll Google skating rinks and drive-in movie theaters, and I'll just show up and say, "Hey, who wants to be, Mr. or Mrs. Terraine Brown?" But it's different. Like we at this point, we do everything married couples should do, but not get married,
Right.
right? So it's a different world.
Everybody's scared to death of it because it's not lasting. And I really feel like it's because we're too impatient. People are just jumping into relationships so quickly, and it, they're just so impatient. And I believe I contribute that to the reasons that I'm a single parent of 3 kids. Is because I was too impatient. I was like, oh, he's good to me, so I think I'll just do this thing, rather than waiting for the right one, or actually seeing the value in myself that, like, you could get a really awesome human. Like, you don't have to settle for the first guy you meet. And so, yeah, I definitely think that people are just running out there trying to grab the first one, which ends up defeating them. And then, people are scared to death. Yeah.
It's scary because if you want children, men and women, they have to, their path is a little bit different. Like women have the biological clock, so they have to make sure that this person is the person that they believe that they can be, and definitely the person that they present.
Yeah.
But it is tough. And I tell the men that I speak to, I was like, one of the hardest periods of your life for men is going to be in your 20s because you're younger, you're full of all this zest, trying to keep it PG, right? You're full of
Yeah.
all this zest and you're still trying to figure it out, but you can ruin your life
Mhm.
very, very quickly if you don't navigate accordingly. And then on the flip side, for women, um, if they're not aware of certain things in their life, then it could be very, very tough for them to try to figure out what they want to do in their 20s. So I think it's kind of tough either way.
Right. So true. So what's the mission behind the Shade Show? What's your mission statement?
Well, a mission statement, it was SOAR, which is you want to that's something that I came up with. I'm trying to think, when did I come up with that? That is something that I came up with when I was actually mentoring. I was mentoring a couple of people, and that's something that I want to share. And then now my mission statement's a little bit different. It's something along the lines as I just want to give a voice to the voiceless, and I want to help people develop better relationships. That could be professional, at work, that could be personal, your friends, and romantic, the type of person you want to spend hopefully the rest of your life with. So that's my mission statement.
I love that. I love that. So I was also checking out your videos today, and I noticed I noticed that you said at the end of one of them that there was something that you asked a lot of people that's joined your show. And so I want to ask you that question is where are you going to take all this? And if you don't see tomorrow, what impact do you wish to leave in this world?
The impact I want to leave is I want to be remembered as someone that was kind and helpful, and someone that was willing to walk the journey with others. And I'm very protective of that legacy. And I'm working very hard to ensure that is the legacy that I leave.
That's a good legacy. So what's coming up exciting? What's your next podcast that we could look forward to checking out?
Well, the next one is going to be, I'm trying to think here. I've done so many. The next one might be yours. No, no, that's soon to come. But the next one is going to be about from a men's perspective, making sure that we do what's right in the relationship part, and making sure that we know that we're being honest and truthful and helpful in the relationships, because I think it's easier to blame other people, and men and women have been blaming each other for a very long time. And I think we need to get back to saying that, hey, if Andrew and I are together, we have an issue, we don't need to go to social media to discuss that issue.
Right.
How about her and I discuss the issue so no one else knows that we ever had an issue? I think we need to get back to that. So that's what I'm going to be talking about on my next few episodes.
That's so good. I think it's imperative for men to realize that when men are raised as, little boys, it's like, man up. Men, boys don't cry, stop being a sissy, and in terms like that. And so next thing you know, you have grown men that don't like to show their weaknesses because they don't want, especially their woman, to see that they're weak, because they want to be strong and take care of her. But at the same time, I do feel like that causes a barrier, because the woman can feel the issue, but that she doesn't know what it is. So she's trying to, maneuver through that sludge without actually knowing what that is. But also, I think it's important for women to be mindful as well, that men do that because of their upbringing and stuff. And it's like to nurture that part of them. Like, I know that you want to be the man and all that stuff, but like, can you tell me what's going on? What's happening with you? What's happening inside of you?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree, because right now I'm going to share with you, Andrea, I'm having a great time. I'm going to let you know my emotions right now. I'm so happy. I'm about to wipe a tear because this is tears of joy. But you're absolutely right. And one of the ways to combat that is to not shame it, right?
Yeah.
Let's not shame women for their emotions. Let's not shame men for their emotions. Let's not shame anyone really, if a man wants to, it's one thing to fall to the ground and you're crying and your arms are wailing in the air. Yeah, you're making a scene, right? You know, and if it's a muscular man, some people may laugh.
Right,
Right? Six
right.
foot five, all this muscle. But I think we have to get back to the point where we're saying, hey, let's communicate.
Yeah,
Right? Dorothy down the street, this is how I feel. Terraine,
right,
this is how I feel. Let's have that conversation, right? Without judgment, let's have sincere conversation. And it goes back to my earlier point where I was having difficulty saying what I felt in a way that would be impactful, where now I know better. But if I had someone to help me along, Andrea, at that point, I think I could have learned it earlier instead of saying someone saying that, well, he's not that serious because he's not crying or he's not kicking his
right.
feet or things like that.
Yeah. And then you have me on the other hand, because there needs to be like that healthy balance. Because me, I'll just like throw everything out of my mouth. There's like no holdbacks. Like, I'm like, I'm not holding none of this stuff in. I'm just gonna give it to you, like all of it. And then that way, like we're communicating here. And then, the other person's like, did that just happen? So,
They're like, oh my goodness, there's so much. You're hitting me too much. You're hitting me too much.
yeah, yeah, it's like, oh, that hurt. But at the same time, it's like, all right, it stings for a moment, but at least I'm not holding it in and, gaining animosity and resentments, and I'm suppressing it. And then months go by and all this different stuff is accumulating. And that's my mindset. But the other person, their mindset's like, well, you would just calm down for a minute. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And I'm like, yeah, but it is to me. So there definitely should be like a healthy balance there. But I definitely do think that I'd rather somebody hurt me for the moment to where like we can flourish rather than hold it all in and try to mind my feelings. Like I'd rather have my feelings hurt for this moment so that I can, maneuver it and work it the right way. But a lot of people, I think that they're so worried about being hit that they don't want to hit their partner with that too, but I think it's important that we, don't hold stuff in for sure.
I will agree. And there are times where some people who that I experience with, they didn't want the confrontation because
Yeah,
confrontation has like ugly word, right? Like we're gonna fight, we're gonna kill
yeah,
each other.
right,
It's just no. And Andrew, I think your approach is the approach. Just say it all out. Hey, today you did 5 things that I didn't like, and this is how it made me feel. Because I'm the same type of way. There's something I don't like. I have to be able to communicate it because if I can't communicate it, I can't expect the person to do anything differently,
exactly.
right? And sometimes we sit there and we're like, you should know
Yeah,
exactly what I feel right now.
right,
If you don't know, it's your fault, and that's part of the
right,
problem. They we're not mind. It's not the
right,
X-Men, right? It's not Marvel comics. We can't read other people's
exactly.
mind, right? So I think we need to be a little bit more honest with ourselves and say, hey, as a child, I was taught how to talk, but I wasn't taught how to communicate. That's what you learn as an adult is how to
Right.
communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, sad fact is that is whenever we learn to communicate before age 12. And, most of us didn't have parents that were very good communicators. I definitely have spoke about this often. It's like I believe the school systems need to step up for that role because the parents are never going to do it. So, like the school system should have a course for the kids before they're out of school to like teach them communication skills, listening skills, stuff like that, and see how much the world would thrive then, relationships and different things like that. Because a lot of people don't know how to communicate.
Yeah, it would need a complete overhaul at that point because the way the school system, at least here in Canada, is that it's very, let's say, like 1800s, right? Where people, you got this education because you're going to go work in a factory or something along those lines, right? Now we got to say, hey, like teach kids how to open a bank account, teach them finances, teach them how to express their emotions in a
Right.
way that's not physical, right? Like we need to And I think that's why in the 2020s we've had so many issues between the sexes, is because we don't know how to express that. It's more like, I see pretty girl, come here. Right? It's a little bit more than that. It's, hey, let's have a proper conversation. Or, I'm in pain, Mrs.
Yeah,
Teacher. The way you asked me a question in class, it made me feel this way. Can we have that conversation?
right.
We need more of that, because we're relying on parents who aren't trained in some cases to experience that, right? But the teachers are
Right.
trained to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. I know my son, I went to school a couple years ago. He was in kindergarten, and they were like doing meditations, like meditations they were playing on the screen in the classroom. And I was like, it's so awesome, like that the school system is starting to evolve in this type of way, where they're teaching kids like how to deal with their emotions through meditations. I was so, excited about that. Hopefully Canada can adopt that.
I'm hoping, because I know I have a few acquaintances that are yoga instructors. I'm trying to get them in different places for that reason. I do meditation. I do yoga every other day in the morning, and I love it. And I think more of us need to be able to calm our minds as before we start our day.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things, like you go to the doctor, you're handed a script and you're expecting that this medication is going to work just because the doctor gave it to you. But then you're like getting all these side effects and different things like that. And then you have to wait a couple days to see if it works. It's like, I tell people, it's meditation, at least try it. And like, you're going to notice a difference that day, but at the same time, it's like as time progresses, you notice more and more the changes that took place in, taking control of your mind instead of letting your mind just do whatever it wanted to do previously.
Yes, and I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, maybe. Sometimes when I'm doing something, I focus on the time, like, okay, it's been a day, it's been a week, it's been a month, but it's a process, and we have to get, I know I have to get used to that. That's something that I had to get used to, was saying that, hey, I'm not going to be able to fix everything in one day, but let's
Right.
have the small victories and then build up to the bigger ones.
Yeah, that's so good. So how do we find you?
You can find me on facebook.com/behind the shades FB. You can find me at my personal website, www.behindtheshades.ca. And you can find me on YouTube if you type in the Behind the Shades show. I should come up there with this kind smile and these wonderful guests that I have on there. And those are the three ways to find me.
I'll definitely be like posting out your links and stuff too. I appreciate you joining me, and yeah, prayers on your pursuits and your legacy, but also I'd love to do this again sometime with the topic. Be
Yes,
awesome.
absolutely. You let Andrea, for you, almost anything. I will definitely be there, Andrea. You are a fantastic person, and I feel blessed that I got to know you a little bit over this last couple months, I think, right? Like, really got to
Yeah,
talking over the last couple months. So I will definitely come back whenever you want me to return, whatever topic you want to talk about. I will be there for sure.
awesome. Let's do it.
It's in my schedule.
All right. Well, I'll be reaching out to you soon. I hope you have an awesome day.
You too, Andrea. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll speak soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe, because we have an awesome guest coming up every week and I don't want you to miss out. If you haven't checked it out yet, Our Daydream does have merch. Check out the description below. God bless, and I'll see you next week. Bye.